How black are Brazilians? Probably less than you think. According to the latest census, less than 8% of Brazilians identify as black, while most of the population identifies as either white or mixed. What is the blackest region in Brazil? It might be less African than you expected. Brazil is home to a large black population, with many having significant African ancestry. The country
Brazil's deep African heritage can be traced back to the early 1500s, when Portuguese colonizers first claimed the territory under Pedro Álvares Cabral. By the mid-16th century, Brazil had become the world's leading producer of sugar, fueling a booming plantation economy that relied heavily on enslaved labor. To meet the growing demand for labor on sugar plantations, millions of Africans, primarily from West and Central Africa, including regions like Angola, Congo, and Benin, were forcibly brought to Brazil. During the height of the transatlantic slave trade, Brazil became the largest importer of enslaved Africans in the Americas, receiving an estimated 4 to 5 million people, or roughly 40–50% of all Africans transported to the New World. This massive influx of enslaved Africans shaped Brazil's demographic and cultural foundations. Even after Brazil declared independence in 1822, slavery persisted. At the time, nearly half of the population remained in bondage. The country's path to abolition was slow and piecemeal, marked by the Lei do Ventre Livre Free Womb Law in 1871, which granted freedom to children born to enslaved mothers, and culminating with the Lei Áurea Golden Law in 1888, which formally abolished slavery throughout Brazil. By then, approximately 700,000 people were still enslaved, making Brazil the last country in the Western Hemisphere to outlaw slavery. This long and entrenched history of enslavement, spanning over 3 centuries, is the fundamental reason why Brazil today has the largest black population outside the African continent. Brazil's modern racial categories reflect the country's colonial past and the legacy of slavery. The Brazilian Institute of Geography and Statistics officially recognizes 5 racial categories: Branco white, Preto black, Pardo brown or mixed race, Amarelo Asian, and Indigena indigenous. In practice, most Brazilians of African descent identify or are classified as either Preto or Pardo, with the latter often denoting individuals of mixed African and European ancestry. According to Brazil's 2022 national census, approximately 20.7 million people identified as Preto, while 92.1 million identified as Pardo. Combined, these groups make up 55.5% of the total population, meaning that more than half of all Brazilians report significant African ancestry, far exceeding the proportion in countries like the United States. In official and academic contexts, the umbrella term Negro is often used to encompass both Pretos and Pardos. Geographically, Afro-Brazilian populations are present across the country, but are especially concentrated in the Northeast and Southeast regions, which were centers of early plantation agriculture and mining. The state of Bahia, in particular, stands out with over 3 million self-identified Black Brazilians, making it a cultural and demographic heart of Afro-Brazilian life. It's important to note that many Pardos, though lighter-skinned, have strong African heritage, a nuance sometimes obscured by Brazil's long-standing ideology of racial democracy. For much of the 20th century, Brazil promoted the idea of harmonious racial mixing, suggesting a society free from the rigid racial divisions seen elsewhere. However, this narrative often masked persistent racial inequality and the sheer scale of the African diaspora in Brazil. As scholars have pointed out, Brazil imported nearly 5 million enslaved Africans, accounting for roughly 40% of the entire transatlantic slave trade, a historical reality that continues to shape the country's racial identity today. Afro-Brazilians have had a profound and lasting impact on Brazil's national culture. From music and dance to religion, cuisine, and sports, African heritage is deeply woven into the country's identity. Iconic music genres like samba, bossa nova, and axe all trace their roots to Afro-Brazilian rhythms and traditions. The vibrant carnival parades, built around samba schools, are a direct celebration of this cultural fusion. Capoeira, a unique blend of martial arts and dance developed by enslaved Africans, remains a powerful symbol of Afro-Brazilian resistance and creativity. In the spiritual realm, religions like Candomblé and Umbanda blend Yoruba, Bantu, and Fon beliefs with Catholicism, forming richly syncretic faiths still widely practiced today. Culinary traditions such as feijoada, a black bean stew, and acarajé, deep-fried black-eyed pea balls, also reflect African influence. In sports, Afro-Brazilians have long dominated national arenas, especially in soccer and volleyball, becoming global icons of athleticism. Despite these cultural contributions, Afro-Brazilians continue to face systemic inequalities. The Brazilian state formally classifies both pretos black and pardos brown mixed race under the umbrella term Negros, a concept reinforced by the Statute of Racial Equality passed in 2010. This law affirms the legal and cultural unity of Afro-descendants, though the boundaries and meanings of these categories remain debated. Civil rights groups, known collectively as the Movimento Negro, have played a vital role in advancing Afro-Brazilian rights and visibility. In recognition of this legacy, Black Awareness Day Dia de Consciência Negra is observed every November 20th, honoring Zumbi dos Palmares, a historic leader of a fugitive slave community. In recent decades, Brazil has also implemented affirmative action policies to address racial inequality. Notably, a 2012 law requires 50% of seats in federal universities to be allocated to public school graduates, with specific subquotas for low-income and Black students. These measures signal a growing, though still contested, national effort to reckon with the lasting impacts of slavery and racial exclusion, while celebrating the deep contributions of Afro-Brazilians to the nation's culture and identity. Despite making up more than half of Brazil's population, Afro-Brazilians continue to face deep-rooted inequalities stemming from the country's long history of slavery and racial hierarchy. In 2021, poverty affected 34.5% of Black and 38.4% of Pardo mixed-race Brazilians, compared to just 18.6% of whites. Unemployment was also higher, 16.5% among Black Brazilians versus 11.3% for whites. Even those employed were often in precarious jobs. Over 43% of Black and 47% of Pardo workers held informal employment, compared to just 32.7% of whites. Income gaps are equally stark. While white Brazilians earned an average of $3,099 per month, Black Brazilians earned just $1,764 and Pardos $1,814. Though Afro-Brazilians make up over half of the workforce, they held less than 30% of managerial roles and remain underrepresented in politics and business. In 2020, homicide rates for Afro-Brazilians were nearly 3 times higher than those for whites, highlighting how violence and structural racism disproportionately affect Black communities. Under President Jair Bolsonaro, affirmative action programs faced cuts and criticism, further intensifying these disparities. In response, Afro-Brazilian movements have fought back, pushing for land rights for Quilombo descendants, defending education quotas, and reclaiming space through literature, art, and digital activism. Despite generations of exclusion, Brazil's Black communities remain resilient and central to the country's ongoing struggle for racial justice. Brazil's large Black population is rooted in its central role in the transatlantic slave trade. Unlike the United States, which received only about 5–6% of enslaved Africans and where Black Americans today make up around 14% of the population, Brazil imported nearly 40–50% of all Africans brought to the Americas, an estimated 4 to 5 million people. As a result, over 55% of Brazilians today identify as Black or mixed-race Preto or Pardo, giving Brazil the largest Afro-descendant population outside of Africa. Other countries in the Americas reflect different trajectories. Haiti, founded after a successful slave revolt in 1804, is about 95% Black, while Colombia's Afro-descendant population is officially around 10%, though likely undercounted. Brazil's centuries-long reliance on slavery, longer than most nations, left a lasting demographic and cultural imprint. While Afro-Brazilians have shaped national identity in countless ways, they continue to face deep racial and economic inequalities that stem directly from this historical legacy.